Welcome back to the activation phase. I'm JP and joined by my co-host, Tim.
Hello.
Let's go. We are continuing our crusade, the Crusades, and see what I did there. And we are going to talk about the Ordensstaat. So we are recording this after the FAQ of 2024 for Crusades and also Javelins, etc. So there's quite a few big changes to the battle board. So I would suggest you check out the FAQ first and put them side by side, since this is one of I guess this board has been fundamentally changed since its original printing. Should we start off with our habitual light fluff section about the Ordensstaat?
Please start us off. The only thing I know about them is they look like cool Templar knights from Assassin's Creed. So that's and they have a cool German name, Ordensstaat.
Yeah, so basically the Germans they tried crusading in the Holy Land, were not very successful, and then decided to move up north and start harassing the Polish and the Baltic people. And they managed to carve out a significant piece of land in the area, and then finally got crushed. But the order still exists, by the way. So
oh, really?
They are still around. So still relevant. Yep. But you're right, they are well known for their pretty funky helmets. So they are kind of like they almost look like fantasy knights, basically. Like they have silver helmets, and they have cool robes, and like it's just such an iconic warband.
They all look like it just came from like a jousting tournament or something. They look
so it's kind of like you're like in the Bretonians for Warhammer, like basically that, like they have ridiculous get-ups on their helmet. I'm not sure how historically accurate it was that they actually went to battle with them, but it doesn't really matter. I don't even want to know. It looks really cool.
It looks very cool.
Oh, closing off. Also, maybe a slight
big fluff section.
Yeah, that was massively so fluffy. Also, a slight aside, they are still around into the 100-Year War era. So they stick around for quite a long time, from the something like the 13th century to like the 15th century, with the Battle of Grunwald in 1410. So they are still around. So potentially very fluffy also to play with your Age of Chivalry against the Age of Chivalry warbands. So there is that. But let's close off this fluff section and start talking about some equipment.
Heck yeah, let's go.
Am I responsible for the equipment?
Absolutely you are, because you are the man with the book.
Right, awesome. So this has a ridiculous amount of equipment options, which is great. It's, one of the few or really undervalued things in Saga is just being able to place various equipment options kind of on the go against different opponents. So this is going to take a little while. So the Warlord and the Hearthguard, they can either be on foot with no special equipment, they can have a heavy weapon, obviously on foot, or they can be mounted on horses. Despite the models and how they look, they do not have barding or anything like that. So it's a little bit, that doesn't exist in Age of Crusades. So it's a little bit confusing once you mix it with different eras, but the models definitely have like armor and barding, but they don't count as having cataphract or anything like that. So that's a quick note there. The warriors have either no equipment options, be mounted on horses with no special equipment, or they can have crossbows. It's pretty tasty. Yeah. Finally, the levies also have options, and they can have either bows or javelins. So lots of different options, lots of actually really good options. I'm not sure, but this is probably one of the warbands with the most options, especially in Age of Crusade. So lots of flexibility, lots of potential to paint things, and yeah, all around pretty solid choice.
I think the being able to kind of put your units down in all the different ways is so good in Crusades, especially because some armies will just destroy horses and some armies will absolutely lose into horses. And I think, man, these Ordensstaat have everything. It's so cool.
Also, you can kind of see what your opponent does with terrain, etc., and figure out, should I put down mounted guys, take more shooting, take guys with javelins. It's, yeah, basically, if you have the available models, you're good to go, whatever your opponent puts down. So it's quite powerful. Also, good thing to note is that they have their own special dice. They're black and white dice. They look really nice, and they seem to be out of stock in a lot of places. Increased popularity in the last few months, so that's a good sign.
I don't quite remember right, but does the Age of Chivalry book not have another faction that uses these dice?
No, the Age of Chivalry has just one set of dice for all of them, except for 2 different colors.
I see. Okay.
We're not. I think everyone knows. Never mind. Okay, we move on to the board itself.
Yeah, do you want to do us the honors and do the basic abilities?
Hell yes. The standard abilities, so the activation of your Warlord, Hearthguard, Warriors, and Levy, there's nothing special there. Same thing with the combat bonus. However, they have FAQ'd the activation pool. So now you don't have an activation pool, you have something arguably even better. It's called Servants of God. This is using an uncommon dice. It's an orders ability. It's remove 1, 2, 3 friendly models as casualties. Roll 1 available Saga die per casualty taken and add them to your inactive Saga dice. So that's in your orders phase, obviously, and it means that your Saga dice that you have not thrown, so that's the inactive Saga dice, or the ones that you've already used in your orders phase, I believe.
Yeah.
Are all available for you to reroll, and then you put what it means when they're inactive, it means that they've been rolled with the face, whatever facing is showing, and that they are available to be placed onto your battle board in the orders phase. So you can have this is pretty powerful. Even if you're down to 1 dice, it's not an issue. You can keep going.
I think which is like something that's super cool about this ability is that it doesn't have to be from the same unit, right? If you have 7 levies and 5 warriors and like, I don't know, 6 warriors somewhere, you just take 1 of each to bring them down to their relevant Saga die number, and then you're good. Or you potentially just take 1 unit of your 6 beautiful levies down to 3 or down to 2 maybe, and it doesn't really matter since you can just, as we will talk about later, just put them back in your opponent's turn and then generate the Saga die happily again when it's back to your orders phase, which is crazy.
Yeah, I'm also surprised that they chose the uncommon for this. Because generally, like, I wouldn't even be surprised, and I think it would still be a good ability if it was a rare that you would require for this. But yeah, uncommon, definitely pretty solid basic ability, and it's a basic one, so you can do it as much as you want, really.
Yeah, it's really cool. All right, let's get into Tyrants. That takes a common or an uncommon, and it's a melee ability that says you may reroll 3 attack dice which failed to score a hit. You may remove a friendly figure within medium of your unit as a casualty to reroll 6 attack dice instead of 3. So the whole thing of the Ordensstaat is to kind of have your tough, scary, beautiful-looking knights and warlord potentially be accompanied by some weakling levy and potentially warriors if you want them a bit more sturdy. And you take away your units to make the relevant fights to kind of push the relevant fights in your favor. And I feel like taking away casualty just for an ability is always tough to make work. But with the new ability of putting casualties back, I think this might work. And so this Tyrants one, I think if you have a big attack and your attack dice matter, it might be okay, but I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I guess a common for just three rolls is okay. It's kind of like having 3 more attacks. So a common for 3 more attacks, that's actually pretty good. So I'm going to stop complaining here.
Yeah, I think so as well. And then whether or not you want to take off model will really be situational on how badly you need to win this particular one. But I think it's pretty solid, but definitely kind of like the trend of the battle board. So this next one is a FAQ ability, and it is a 2 dice ability using a common and a rare. It's called Din of Battle. It's a melee ability for an attacker. So place a fatigue on an enemy unit and on another enemy unit within M of your unit. So 2 dice abilities. I think we're generally pretty skeptical of 2 dice abilities in this podcast, but 2 mitigating factors here. 1, this is not something you can be all the time. 2, you are able to pump up your dice numbers with this particular battle board. So it's less bad, and generally, given that you're going to be rolling a lot of dice, you have a pretty good chance of having an extra rare floating around that you can use for this particular ability. Having said that, this is in melee, so you can already exploit the fatigue that you place on the unit that you're attacking. Straight away, which is nice as a local advantage. Plus, you can make sure that some other unit in the vicinity, so for example, a warlord or some other pesky unit, is already kind of lined up, have a fatigue for example, like a follow-up charge or something else. So I think there's a very utility, or it can be very powerful in the correct situation. The dice freeness of this ability is maybe less bad than what we're used to due to the kind of inherent mechanics of the board itself. And I think in the right time, especially late game, this is going to be incredibly powerful. So I think combined maybe also with like the shooting that you have and the mercenaries that you have available to you, it means that you can really like load up some fatigue on a warlord who's hiding behind you, behind somewhere, for like a killer blow later on. But I think it's a nice little ability, a little bit on the expensive side, but I think potentially, if you line it up correctly, can be quite powerful.
Yeah, and expensive is super like relative with this board, right? Since that Servants of God just gives you so many chances to get the rare. Having a 2 dice ability is not as punishing as it usually is, because this board maybe doesn't mind as much, but we'll see. All right, next up is Serfs. It's an activation reaction that can either take an uncommon or a rare, and the rare has no upside. Trigger this ability after a charge is declared against one of your levy units, but before the activation is resolved. Remove a figure from your unit as a casualty to activate the unit to either move or make a shooting attack against the charging unit. I think this one just works super well with the board. Like, you want to keep your levy safe because they need to be next to your Hearthguard, and they maybe even shield your Hearthguard, so they may be in front. And if you can make sure that maybe you're shot in your turn and you can shoot again in their turn, so no fatigue is put down, which is super handy. Or you can, even by taking away a single figure, you sometimes can deny the charge. And since people can't redirect charges with the current FAQ, moving out of reach, even just slightly, is super good to potentially have a clean charge with your Hearthguard next turn, which is something that's sometimes just very hard to do. And this one does it super well. I really like this ability because it is flexible and it's exactly what your Warband wants to do.
Also, it really gives a good fluffy reason to throw your peasants in front of your hearth guard as well. So I think that's really good. I've also not charged levy with like Hearthguard, for example, for like Javelin Hearthguard with pagan peoples, or if your guys have composite bows like the Saracens, like it becomes so incredibly shit to get shot up by some levy in your own turn as well.
Yeah.
It's like not good, and it's like and you're gonna, especially with those warbands with like your armor 4 Hearthguard, like you're really not going to do this. Already charging levy is not the greatest proposition. Getting shot up before you charge the levy, yeah, it's just not. It makes it very unlikely to be a good winning move. So
Yeah.
it just becomes a big hard block, and it's horrible, especially because they can come back as well, as we'll see later in the board. So yes, this is a solid ability.
Very good place for an uncommon for sure.
All right, the next one is again a 2 dice ability using a common and an uncommon. It's called Martial Pride. This is a melee ability. Your attack dice get a +1 bonus. That's it. That's the ability. So it's nice and simple. This obviously you can combine this with your heavy weapon guys, which becomes pretty beastly. However, yeah, again, 2 dice ability. However, this time with uncommon, I think you're probably going to want to do this for your big charge with your, for example, a Hearthguard or with your Warlord to make sure that it actually counts for something. It's just a solid ability, especially if you don't want to have the vulnerability of having heavy weapons. You just your normal sword and board Hearthguard become pretty tasty. As well. So I think it's good. 2 dice abilities might be a little bit tough, but again, there are ways of getting around that with the new FAQ abilities like Servants of God. So I think adds a lot of hitting power to a warband that already has like a decent hitting power.
And with the current FAQ, it doesn't mess around with tyrants anymore, or it's not a problem because you always apply your modifiers first and then you check to do rerolls. So a failed hit will actually be a failed hit all the time, and that's very nice. And this also kind of pushes you in the direction of having at least 12 or 16 attack dice generated by your unit. So 12 warriors or 6 Hearthguard or even 8 Hearthguard, because of course the more attack dice you generate, the better this is. And I'm not sure if that's the best way to build an army, so I feel like this pushes you kind of in a direction that might be a trap, but if you can pull it off, it's going to be bone crushing for sure.
Yeah, I think this board is all about like the making your hard hitting units even more reliable and hard hitting. So I think this is a kind of falls within that that vibe.
All right, next up is Slay the Pagans, and it takes a common or an uncommon. It's an activation that says activate 2 of your units within short of each other to charge. Nice. It's a multi-activation. We love multi-activations, and the units have to be quite close to each other. But with Din of Battle, for example, which really wants you to kind of fight multiple times in a closer area, I feel like this just works very well. And if you're definitely a melee army, there's no denying that. There's not a single shooting buffing ability on you other than the combat bonus, of course. So having a cheap charge is good.
Definitely. Also, it combines very nicely with the next ability. So this one is also BF. This is using a rare. It's an activation and it's called Nach Osten. So activate any of your units for a move which does not generate a fatigue. During this activation, their movement distance is S, no matter their usual movement distance. This activation is ignored when calculating fatigue for later activations. So generally a very sweet ability. I think this gets used as pretty much every single time that it can be used. The flexibility is just insane. This is a such a flexible unit. It's also activate any of your units. It's not activate all of your units. So that's also nice. However, this doesn't do any fatigue anyway, so it's not a big deal. But it does mean that you can kind of get around the shooting issue with crossbows, that you can relatively easily get 2 shots in a turn without getting tons of fatigue. So that's quite nice. You shoot, you play this, and then you can shoot again. So that makes it very, very powerful. Generally, moving units through difficult terrain becomes less of an issue, both with horses and also just guys on foot. And it makes it incredibly viable just to take your Hearthguard on foot and not lose a ton of flexibility on movement either.
Yeah.
So I think all round, it's an incredibly powerful ability. And kind of in the vein that we like multiple activation abilities, this is an incredibly good one. It's not only a multiple activation ability on all your units, it's also fatigue free. So you can do it whenever you want in the turn, whenever it makes sense for your particular situation. So just all around, such a powerhouse of the board.
Yeah, it's insane, and it works with everything on here, right? With the crossbows, with the javelin guys, with the normal bows, the guys on horses, and the very, very tough games, I feel, are the games where it is all about measuring and measuring and measuring again, and having the ability to just be able to use a different stick, basically, than your opponent, just a longer stick, because you can always count your charge as longer than it usually would be. That's so good. It's so good. It's, yeah. First time I read this, I thought it was for a single unit, and I still thought it's good. So it's a very good ability.
Yeah, also this just messes with your opponent's mind so much. They always have to inconvenience themselves unless they can charge L plus S.
Yes. So sorry.
Your cat also wants to get in on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right, but generally this ability is amazing. So I think there's no turn where this cannot be put to good use.
It's like one of the best abilities in Saga. in the whole 60-ish battle boards. So that's pretty cool.
Quite a statement, Tim, but I think you might be almost right.
I stand by it. It's like 7 activations that generate no fatigue, don't count for the next activations, and yes, they're just short, but that it has no downside. There's nothing here to that. Yeah, it's insane. All right.
I think we like this ability. All right.
Yeah. Next up is Zealous Works. It's a shooting reaction that takes a common or an uncommon. Put a fatigue marker on your unit to increase its armor by 2. I think this unit is this ability is utter bullshit and complete garbage, but I'm happy for anybody to disagree. I hate this ability, but because I think if you invest a die into something, you expect very good returns without having to pay more for something later. Yes, this might be okay with a unit that has a banner on it, and where you don't use the banner to do actual work, especially like, for example, with crossbow warriors with the banner they're not same with the sport. So I think this ability is really, really, really bad, because you could just put it on another ability and have a lot more mileage out of the one die. What do you think?
I don't think it's as bad as you say. I think the downside with the fatigue is not great, especially because you don't have an easy way of getting rid of fatigue in this board. but it's a decision you can make at the time if you do not want to, for example, lose your mounted Hearthguard or something like that. But it means that you can be a little bit sloppy about the placement of your units, especially after charges or something like that. But you're right, the fatigue is a little bit of a bummer.
And I don't want to cut you off here, but there's no reason with this board to be sloppy, because you have Nach Osten, and you can always use this to kind of get out of the way again. And if you have to charge somewhere where you're going to be able, if you have to have your Hearthguard on horse charge somewhere where they can still be shot after you use Nach Osten, then the game's lost anyway. Like I see no situation where Zealous Works would be worth a die. I'm a hater.
All right, Tim. Not everyone can be a genius tactical mastermind all the time.
Fuck off! No, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think for example, the Pagan people have an ability where you can do the same thing without having to place a fatigue on your own unit. You do have to be close to terrain, but that's normally okay. But yes, generally, it's a little bit of a bummer, especially because you can't handle fatigue super well with this board.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the Sword Brothers. This is a single dice ability using either a rare or an uncommon. You can use it in melee or as a shooting reaction ability. And finally, you can only use it on your Hearthguards or heroes. So gain 2 defense dice, or 4 if you have used a rare. You may remove a friendly figure within M of your unit as a casualty in order to gain 3 additional defense dice. So again, I think this one was not FAQ'd, but it became better because of ability we'll discuss later. It used to be a little bit iffy. I mean, generally for an uncommon 2 defense dice, it's not bad as a shooting reaction. I think that alone would be just an okay ability, not great. 4 defense dice for a rare is starting to get pretty tasty. And now, whether or not you remove a levy to get even more out of this ability, I think it will be down to kind of like where you're sitting and how important this particular melee is for the rest of the game. But I think late game, this is probably something you want to do to save your warlord or save your Hearthguard, especially due to the Hearthguard having such an important role in the battle board. So I think it's kind of creeping up there, becoming more useful, and I can definitely see myself playing this.
Yeah, I really struggle with abilities that kind of project very clearly what my plan is to my opponent. Like abilities that say, hey, this only works with warriors or Hearthguards or whatever. And so I'm always quite skeptical about them. But having 5 defense dice in an important melee that I think is the more the more realistic scenario that you initiated, having 5 defense dice for an uncommon and a levy is pretty good value. Especially since you can just get the levy back in for a common in a second. So yeah, this is good now. It's good now.
Yeah, even I think if you decide to go the Hearthguard or Warlord with heavy weapon root, becomes so much more survivable, and you can really pump up that aggressiveness of your killer units. So I think I like it, but I don't know. I need to take this board for a spin to figure out how often you'd actually be taking off a levy and everything else. But I think potentially pretty tasty.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, next up is Dark Cross's Pure Hearts, melee ability for Hearthguards or heroes again that has been FAQ'd. You may remove up to 4 friendly figures within medium of your unit as casualties. For each model removed, gain 2 attack or 2 defense dice. So talking about that 8 stack of Hearthguard next to unit of your cannon fodder, playing this and getting from 16 to 24 attack dice while still getting +1 bonus to your attack dice, and that's a common and 2 uncommons, which is not something that's crazy or unthinkable to play for a single combat. That's pretty good, but only because of the next ability. Because losing 4 levies is still annoying, and you will have to think about if it's worth it. But in my opinion, if you play this and you don't have a reason not to take the 4, like if you have a good reason to only take 3, I guess, but if you play this, you should usually full send it to get the most value out of this. So take 4 figures off, and I think this is an ability that has a lot of potential, defensive and offensive.
Yeah, I think this is also just good because you can see which way the combat is going and see what's kind of see what your opponent is stacking up against you, and act accordingly. So yes, and let's move to perhaps the tastiest FAQ change of this year. This is actually the only ability where you can use all of your dice facings, so common, uncommon, or rare. It's called Enlist. It's an orders reaction. So you're playing this in your opponent's turn, in their orders phase. So designate a warriors or levies unit within L of a unit of friendly Hearthguard. Add 2 models, 3 if they are levies, to this unit, and add 1 additional model if a rare is used, without exceeding its starting number of models. So this is kind of like your Undead Legions type ability almost, where you're just throwing back all those guys that you sacrificed earlier in the game. You're putting them back on the board in your opponent's turn for a ridiculously cheap cost of any dice facing, including common. So this is just such an insane little yo-yoing between Servants of God, I'm taking off guys to get dice. Oh, guess what? I'm putting them back on. The flexibility you gain here, I think it takes a little bit of practice, and I'm really looking forward to try it. But yes, I think we were chatting just before we hit the record button on what you can do, especially with the scenarios, the tournament packs, having to have a unit that can generate a Saga dice to capture and claim objectives, everything like that. This is suddenly not a problem anymore. You can just kind of go nuts and just make sure that you put this back in your opponent's turn, make sure they're back up to strength, either six levies or whatever, and you're pretty much guaranteed to, or not guaranteed, but you can get your Saga dice investment back basically within the next turn. So is there a reason you wouldn't be doing this? I don't think so.
No, this is so good. With the basic ability Servants of God, it literally has no reason not to do this. It's insane.
Yeah, the previous version of the sport, you didn't have the ability to put back your levy or your warriors, but now there's so it was always a very tough trade-off to figure out if it was worth it or not in that particular time period. But now that restriction has almost disappeared, and now you can really just pump it up and take off a handful of guys and then place them back later whilst getting your sweet melee or whatever buff. So this has kind of changed the board from being seen as a little bit limited to causing the Ordensstaat Saga dice to sell out in multiple online locations.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Their whole history is super popular, and they look incredible, and I can only imagine they're insanely fun to build. And the battle board being lackluster was a bit frustrating, but this is it's a different battle board now, and it's so good.
Yeah, so I think maybe we should kind of bring it all together, how would you play this particular battle board for our newer players? Like, what are they taking to the board, and how are they gonna do like one of the common missions or common scenarios? Can you walk us through that?
I can certainly try. I feel like the battle board really rewards. I mean, obviously rewards the combination of Hearthguard and levies, and an 8 stack of Hearthguard is always quite scary, so I might go for 6. And I think the board also kind of likes, for missions, maybe likes warriors, but doesn't really support warriors at all, which is frustrating. But warriors are, I mean, good on their own. But I think this might be one of the few boards where you don't really need to bring warriors. So maybe it's something like 3.5 points of Hearthguard, so 8 and 6 maybe, and 2.5 points of levies to walk up with them. But that's super hard to tell. I feel like that's something that needs to be figured out by playing, and I haven't played the new ones yet. But their whole game plan, in my opinion, is depending on your opponent, is to either try to shield your levies with your Hearthguard for as long as you can, because if your opponent is a melee faction, then your Hearthguard are the worst thing for them to charge ever, because you will definitely hurt them a lot. And if your opponent is a shooting faction, then you really want your levies to take the hit for your Hearthguard instead. So I think you either shield your Hearthguard with the levies, or you shield the levies with the Hearthguard, depending on your opponent, and you kind of run them up in groups. I think it's much better to put your Hearthguard on foot here, because you have the flexibility of Nach Osten, and you can do Slay the Pagans to have multi-activations, so you don't struggle as much. I'm not the biggest fan of crossbows, because I think they're always quite limited in like how far they can reach, but I think they might be a cool option to, if you know your opponent's a mounted army, to just bring them potentially. So maybe 1 point of warriors, so 3 points of 2.5 points of Hearthguard. It's something to figure out, but the essence is, if you want to do feasting and pillaging, for example, you concentrate on 2/3 of the board, and you put your Hearthguard and your levies down together, and one shields the other, and you move them up, and you will be super quick, potentially quicker than your opponent, even though you're on foot. And you're gonna go into the tough close-up fight, and you will win by having better melee abilities. And if your opponent has a lot of horses and is trying to kind of go around, then you have to use your terrain to build tight corridors where your opponent kind of has to go. There's only one open hill, so if they place it on the left side, you ignore the left side. If they place it on the right side, you ignore the right side. You go wherever the terrain is, and use the terrain to shield your weaker unit, so the unit in the back that you want to be shielding, so either the Hearthguard into shooting or the levy into melee armies, and move up the board and win in melee. I think that's pretty much the game plan here.
Nice and simple. Yeah, I think so too. I'm a little bit surprised you went for the 3.5 points of Hearthguard. That's a pretty ballsy move.
Yep.
I'm not sure I would be quite. I think you definitely need 2 units of Hearthguard, because you need 1 unit that's of a good size, make the buffs worthwhile on your board, especially like the 2 dice abilities. So you really need to make sure that you arrive with like a sizable unit that can do a lot of damage, and you also need a unit that's kind of like hanging in the back, either protecting your warlord or making sure that guys are within kind of like the correct length, like was it L or something, or
it is L to revive.
Yeah. So you need, I think 2 is necessary, unfortunately.
Yep, and the thing is, I don't think this battle board has the need to leave units in the back. I think with Nach Osten and the potentially javelin levies, you can kind of move your whole board and use your big units of either Hearthguard or levies to block off the relevant areas, so there is no in the back. So an enemy can't really get behind you. And I think you really need to have your punches, your important melee units close together to, once the melee starts, to bring a killing blow quickly and in hopefully 1 or 2 turns. Otherwise, because you're still depleting your resources by taking away your levies. Yes, you can put them back, but just by the lower half, or the special abilities, you can potentially take off 7 levies per turn, and you can only really place 4 back. So, and you definitely still want to be doing Servants of God. So you sacrifice like 8 or 9 levies per turn to do your stuff. So you don't have that much time, if you want to do everything, to finish them off. That's my too aggressive take. Again, I'm known for for that playstyle, but I really want to try these guys out because they seem like they could steamroll so hard now.
Yeah, they look really fun. I think it's a good point about that there's no backfield anymore. Like, there's no wasting a dice on moving a levy in the perfect location or something like that. Like, the Nach Osten kind of takes care of that, and you can kind of make sure by sacrificing your levy that you will get that rare on a pretty high probability. So I think it's and like the movement game is such an important part of the game, that anything that you can do that, especially it's got Slay the Pagans as well, so it's like a multi activation on the charge, the Nach Osten, that's just such a powerful combination. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of these guys on the board. So looking forward to that. And I kind of tend to, I must agree with you, like the warriors kind of fall somewhere. Yeah, they're generally pretty good on their own. I think we have a mercenary option which kind of covers that base as well, which makes them maybe less important to take the unit of of crossbows.
Mm-hmm.
Your levy now are like not a drain on your resources. They can move up with Nach Osten. They can defend themselves relatively well with serfs. You can make sure that you're not losing dice really easily in melee, as long as they survive with enlist, to put them back on the board again. So I think you're like, I would probably skip the warriors, unfortunately, and I would just go Hearthguard and levy and mercenary. Probably 2 points of levy. I'm not sure javelins or bows. I think bows are pretty tasty, especially with the serf's ability. And Hearthguard, kind of depending on whatever the objectives, terrain, opponent, on whichever kind of different equipment option. So I think the flexibility is huge.
Yes, one more thing for the levies, since in my game plan for the levies, they're the one that you play into armies that have horses, or I guess shoot better. And so for the levies, I'd always take javelins, because they have a long reach with this board, right? It's like 16 inches, like an S and an L with no fatigue. They can't shoot again, but they're like 33% tougher when being shot at, which is super, super relevant. And I think the javelins, when you take them to protect your Hearthguard, are better as javelin, and the levies are better if you take them to protect your Hearthguard, are better as javelin, and if you take the Hearthguard to protect your bowmen, then the levies, then they're much better with bows, I think.
Yeah.
So it's such a cool board. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I think the power play will be 12 levies with javelins and martial pride to get the sweet +2 bonus on the charge.
Heck yeah. One more,
Right.
one more thing. One more thing I think is interesting to consider, and that is to use because we use half points, right? To put down 1 point of warriors in your army list, and then deciding whether you want to put that down to half a point to just use them as a dice battery, which isn't a big deal. It's half a point. Dice batteries are good anyway. Or you can go up to 12 warriors if you need them and put them down with crossbows. And having 12 warriors with crossbows and a banner is still very good in the right matchups. So I think that's actually really nice to put down probably 3 points of, like, write down 3 points of Hearthguard, 2 points of levies, and 1 point of warriors, and then decide whether or not you're taking out a half point of your warriors to potentially take another half point of Hearthguard, or sacrifice half point of levies to get another half point of warriors. I think that's actually very good.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid recommendation. Very little downsides. I think one thing that we generally see as well is the Turkopools as a very popular choice for the Ordensstaat. So it's essentially a 1 point mercenary unit of mounted warriors. They have no special equipment options, but they kind of count as having like normal bows. With they have lots of special rules, etc., and it works quite nicely with the board. I think generally they're still a very solid choice to include as well.
Yeah, the Turkopools work. They're the I don't think they work too well for the army that's wholly on, like, fully on foot, but yeah, for mounted armies they're really good.
Yeah, but I think they don't really need mercenaries anymore. I think they were mostly using the Turkopools because they were very good, and it made the army kind of like a little bit more competitive. I think now it's plenty competitive on its own, so less important, and you might just want the flexibility of being able to do the little warrior trick that you're talking about instead, and just focusing more on levies. So I think this is a very positive change to the battle board and generally the Age of Crusades itself in terms of the viability of this army. So super pumped. I think we're both having a look at how to play this in the future.
Yeah,
I think we can safely say the Gripping Beast Dark Age Warriors will be a solid pick for your levies. So
yes.
Cover that one. I also really like the metal models from Gripping Beast in terms of the Ordensstaat knights and everything else. They're really characterful. I don't think they mix very well with other lines because it's very specific sculpting style, but the models themselves are really nice. Victrix has also recently released a fantasy type sprue for their knight. Mounted knights with lots of different head options, and yeah, it's kind of leaning towards the Ordensstaat as well. So you have kind of like the appropriate headgear. So you have a nice like a plastic option as well. Fireforge's been doing these knights for a long time as well. So if you want to do that, and they also have like the warriors on foot and mounted that are appropriate. So I think lots of different options both in metal and plastic. So lots to go around. So and also 3D printed now. So whatever you want, you can get now.
The heads by Victrix together with the medieval knights are just insane. I think they did such a good job, and they did obviously there's cloaks as well and other like more ornate shields and stuff. It's a perfect kit to do Ordensstaat.
Yeah, it's like yeah, I think they made a very smart choice to do this because it just makes it so flexible, and I'm not sure what the connections are on the heads themselves, but they probably okay like the I think the Knights on Foot kit is going to release soon as well. So that makes it quite flexible.
Yeah, it's so cool.
All right. I think we're positive about this board. So
yeah.
Let's round this recording off. And do we dare to say what the next one will be?
Maybe we can kind of give away that we did the Paid People ones, and then like 2 days after the FAQ came out, and we kind of potentially might want to do that one again. We'll see.
I think we do. The changes were significant, so we're probably gonna redo that one again, and then make it nice and coherent. Because otherwise, we would have to splice in like a voiceover or something, which makes no sense whatsoever. But I think
sound as good.
Oh, I think the general vibe for Age of Crusades is like it's got a massive boost after the FAQ. People are talking about it a lot. There's some nice changes in kind of the various power levels. Some changes are maybe less well received. I think the Polish are kind of like need to see where they end up. The Moors are still. I think we might have like Hamza on again to talk about the Moors or something. But I think that the changes are kind of directionally pretty good, like in the right direction. So I think overall it's super happy. It gives a lot, kind of like a necessary boost to the era as well.
Yeah, I think the whole FAQ in general, the FAQ is a win. I'm looking to see more FAQs for the other ages as well.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, everyone. Nice to talk to you again, and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.